We are back with our live presentations of our Hangout Habits. We drop these every week, and they are tips and tricks to help you move your job search forward. Today, we're going to be talking about resume ideas in the current hiring climate. It's a unique time to be looking for a job and writing your resume. And we're so excited to have Amy Thompson here from Sound Professionals. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Meanwhile, we want to give you a heads up about a couple of things from the Swing Shift. We have an accountability community and cohort that just kicked off this week. It's both live and video on demand. So if you're thinking about looking for an accountability community that will help you get your job search jump-started, this week would be a great time to join in. You can go to our website to see more. We do have an online LinkedIn and personal brand workshop. It's video on demand. You can go to the site to see more about that. And if you follow us at all, you'll know that we have our book, Back to Business, available now. It just started shipping within the last week. And we also have an accompanying e-course so that you can follow all of those lessons and programs at your own leisure. You can go to backtobusinessbook.com to find more. Our early reviews, we're gratified to see, are very positive. And we are thrilled to be able to make this available to such a wide array of people. That's enough about us. Today, I am delighted to have Amy Thompson, who's the founder and lead coach at Sound Interview Partners. Is that right, Amy?
Sound Interview Professionals.
Professionals. I'll fix that in the show notes. Amy's background is in human resources. She's got over 13 years of experience. She did found Sound Interview Professionals, and they provide resume services and interview coaching to clients across the U.S. Throughout Amy's career, she's partnered with hiring managers in a variety of fields, ranging from engineering to hospitality and then even HR. Prior to starting her own company, she spent time working at Boeing, where she was responsible for managing projects in executive talent management, employee development, and staffing. And prior to that, she worked in a hospitality role at a large hotel chain, in an HR role for hospitality, where she focused on staffing, designing and deploying onboarding, employee engagement, and HR analytics. So Amy's got a super rich background in this. Like me and Sarah, she's home working with small children. So Amy gets the extra gold star from us. And today, we're going to have a conversation about resumes. And there's 3 topics we're going to hit on: objectives versus career summaries, why you talk about accomplishments versus job roles, and then we're going to talk a little bit about metrics. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now so that we can really focus on Amy. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the Swing Shift's Hangout Habits.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So, Amy, tell me a little bit, but we're going to talk about those 3 topics. Tell me a little bit about how you got into the business of working on resumes and interview prep.
Right. So I worked in corporate for a long time. And when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I ended up in the hospital while I was on vacation. She was born at 32 weeks.
Oh.
And she's fine. She's 7 years old now, and she's strong and thriving. But by the time my maternity leave was over and it was time for me to go to work, I had this teeny tiny baby who was 8 pounds and the adjusted age of about a month. And I wasn't ready to go back to work. And so I quit my job to stay at home with her. And after staying at home with her for about 6 months, I started getting really kind of stir crazy. And one of the things that was my favorite and the most fulfilling thing I did while I was at work was helping people get new jobs and getting them the interviews and like calling somebody
Yes.
or having them call me and say, "Hey, I got the job. Thank you so much for your help." And so that's where the idea for Sound Interview Professionals really came from, was the goal and the desire to want to help people get new jobs.
Right. And
So
so I think one thing about your business that I personally really love is that you figured out a way how to use your skills and talents in a very transferable manner, because you're not doing what you did before.
no, not
No.
at all.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that, making sure that you've built a business that fits all of the elements of your life, that's super important to us at the Swing Chef, because 45% of American women take breaks. And when they
Right.
want to go back, they want to do what you're doing and not necessarily doing resumes.
So, Amy, quick question. And before we get to the meat of the resume. So when you were thinking about, because this is kind of an exercise that we have a lot of the people in our community do when they're in transition, and trying to figure out what's next. Did you intentionally like sit down and think about what were those parts of my jobs that I loved? Did someone give you that advice to do that? Did you just kind of know that that's kind of the next step? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
So yeah, I remember my husband's a software engineer, and I remember like we would have a date night once a week, and I'd sit there and I'd be like, I really want to get like, I want to do something like I want to help people. I had volunteered in the past and taught workshops on how to prepare resumes. And so I did some research as far as like what people were doing out in the community. And I knew I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to be a resume writer.
Mhm.
I knew I didn't want to go back to like the recruiting side of things. I wanted the flexibility in my schedule. Um, and so in kind of laying out those parameters and knowing like what I liked and what I didn't like, the resumes really came from like teaching people how to update their resumes. Like I don't write resumes for people. It's not fun. It's not what I want to do. You couldn't pay me enough to do that.
Right.
But I would rather, help somebody edit their resume and teach them like, this is what you're looking for. This is how employers are looking at your resume and what they're seeing from that previous experience.
I love.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I love that. We always tell people that you can almost learn just as much as what you don't want to do versus what you do want to do. Because for many people, that's an easier starting point, is to understand, well, I don't enjoy this. I know that for a fact, right?
Right.
And so it's a good place to start for a lot of people. Yeah.
Right. So as you got into this, and I'm sure you've reviewed thousands of resumes. One thing I'd like to jump into here is let's talk a little bit about how they've changed. At the top, years ago, you used to put an objective, but that's shifted over to career summary. Can you talk a little bit about why that shifted and what your perspective on this is?
Right. Yeah. When I was in college, we had to have resume objectives. And it was so silly because every resume objective was, I want to use my skills and abilities to
Right.
perform well at
Get
your
a job.
right? And so I think at some point it finally clicked that, hey, resumes are pretty obvious. Like you're obviously applying to this job. You're obviously interested in this job. And the shift now is the resume objective statement isn't about you and what you want as a job seeker. It's about what you're offering and what you can bring to the organization. And that's where it's really important. Sometimes an objective statement is still relevant in a resume, just don't call it that.
Right.
In that career summary, what are you bringing to the table? What are you offering? A seasoned professional with X years of experience in dot, 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 dot. And then if you're switching industries or you're getting back to work or something like that, you may want to say, looking to shift my career into product management or something along those lines.
Right. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about switching industries or switching roles. Is it okay to say I'm looking to switch, or should you be talking about a particular skill that you bring that's transferable? What do you see there?
It's the saying I'm looking to switch is probably better in the cover letter, where you have more of an opportunity to explain it. In your career summary or your kind of objective statement there, you want to keep it to like 3 to 5 lines. And so you don't really have enough space to explain the why behind it. And knowing that your resume is going through a computer, and the computer is the first person to read
Right.
your resume, the keywords are really important. So it is important to talk about the skills that you have that are relevant to the job that you're applying.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that that's something we talk about, that that's a good thing to keep in mind. Most of the time, a person isn't looking at it first pass, right? It's a bot.
Yeah. It's a computer, and once you get the keywords that you match, your resume kind of gets ranked in the system, and the recruiters are going to start with the top ranking resumes, and they're going to go down until they have enough.
Right.
And they may never see your resume, unfortunately, unless
Yeah.
you have those keywords.
Can we talk about that for a second, Amy? The ranking. Obviously, it's a computer's doing it, so it's hard to tell exactly the ranking system. But is it mostly about keywords? Is it recent experience? Is it relevant? Like, what goes into those rankings? Do you know?
There's a lot of kind of black box that goes into it, unfortunately. But it is mostly keywords in my experience. The best way to get your resume through is to really customize it to meet those experience requirements on the job description. There's websites out there that will scan the resume and scan the job description and kind of tell you and give you an idea of what keywords. They've reverse engineered that. And that can be a useful kind of last minute check. You don't want to copy the job description verbatim though, right? In the past, people would like put the job description in white on their resume and hide it. And the algorithms are smart enough to pick that up and will reject it on that basis. But using the language the company is using in your resume will really help you get a higher match.
Right. Right. I wanna go to the next section. Used to be that you would, and still are, you list your resume in reverse or chronological order, right? Most recent to least, and that you list your job roles. But increasingly, it's your accomplishments that are the things that are most recognizable. Can you talk about how to do this within the context of your job roles? Because we all know what we do. I was a product manager, I was a marketer, I was an analyst. So how do you talk about these accomplishments within the scope of the job role?
Right. Excuse me. So what we used to see is kind of reporting the news. Like, I was the office manager. I was responsible for managing the conference rooms and ordering supplies. Right. And what we're shifting more towards is the accomplishment space. So one of the questions I'll ask clients as I'm reviewing their resume and I see these kind of functional reporting the news bullets is, so what? Why did you do that? And I keep asking, so what, until we get to, well, I oversaw the office management for a 100-person, 10,000 square foot office, and I managed 10 conference rooms, and I improved the supply ordering process. And so because I did those things, we never ran out of supplies. So you're talking through like why and what's important there and what skills can you bring to your future employer.
Right. So it's almost like you have to drill yourself a little bit and say, so what happened next? And then what happened? And then what happened? And as a result of that, what happened?
Yeah. And what was the impact I made by doing those things?
People talk a lot about impact these days. And I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about what impact means in a resume context? Because I was working with somebody last week who said, can you look at my resume with an eye towards the impact? And I was like, any accomplishments? I don't really know. So I'd love to know what you think about this.
Yeah. So when we talk about impact, like the easiest way to talk about your impact is by using numbers, right? Or metrics.
Right.
But really the impact, like, how are you changing the organization? Are you saving time? Are you saving money? Are you
Got it.
making sales? Like what have you done and how has it benefited your company? Have you improved your customer satisfaction?
Right.
Those kind of things.
Got it. One question, particularly with women, that comes up is it's the me versus we. And many times people will say, well, I worked with a team and my role was this, but as a team, we accomplished that. Can you talk a little about the me versus we element when you're writing a resume?
So first thing, there should be no me's or we's in your resume. It should all be third person. I see a lot of I's in the resume too, which is definitely not what we want. We want to write it from a like professional document. So, but you do want to take credit. If you are a part of a team, you want to be clear about what your impact on that team was. So you could say something like, I led, not I, but led a team or coordinated a team of how many people in order to do what. If you were a team member, maybe you were a part of or a committee, or maybe you designed something with a team.
Right.
You know, cross-functional teams are really big right now. It's something that most companies are looking for. And so that keyword is important to have in your resume in a lot of cases. But yeah, no, it's important to take control and take advantage of what you've done. And as women, it's very difficult in a lot of cases to say, I did this. Here's my impact.
And honestly, Sarah and I hear this many, many, many times, right? And so and I love that you're saying, no, let's put this in the third person, because it makes it a little easier to write about it when it's not quite so personal. But also, I think it's super important to own your accomplishments.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what they want to know. What is it that you did? And as you said, because in a cross-functional environment, knowing that you can work with others, collaboration is collaboration across organizational boundaries, super important and hard to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's a hard thing to do.
I also, real quick, Nancy, want to call out. So when you're talking about third person versus first person, you're not saying if I'm writing my resume that Sarah did this using that. I just want to make that very clear to people.
Right. Yeah.
It's not that kind of third person. Yeah. You're just not using the I's or the we's or anything like that. It's just stating what the accomplishments were, the impact. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So probably goes without saying, but just in case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to switch to our third talking point, which is let's talk about measuring your success with metrics. And it's related to accomplishments, but it's got its own specific definition. And Amy, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you see here that's important.
Yeah. So I think that measuring your success is something that most of my clients have struggled with, right? When I get the resume for the first time and I look at it and I say, okay, so, how many people did you touch? What was your impact? What kind of things did you do? They're like, oh, I can't come up with metrics. And I worked with a client just the other day who was in consulting, and she's like, it's impossible to measure my success because I work with a client and then they take my recommendations and they go, and I never hear back. Like, was it successful? Was it not? And yes, it's important if you can quantify that you've improved sales or you've saved time or things like that. But then you also can look at some of those non-quantitative metrics. Like, did you make the customer happy? Did they keep coming back?
Right.
Did you, improve a relationship? Did you save a relationship? What are those kind of things too? And you can take advantage and use those as accomplishments on your resume.
It's a great point.
With some of the older jobs too, people struggle like, oh my gosh, that was 10 years ago. How am I supposed to remember how much money I saved? And I will often tell clients, when they're doing an employment verification and they're checking on your background and they're ready to make an offer, they're not going to look at that bullet on your resume and say, well, did Jane, did she really improve it by 25%, or was it actually only 23%? Right? Nobody's going to validate to that specific level. That doesn't mean you should lie. Don't make things up, because you still will get asked about it in an interview. But it's okay to use your best estimate.
Right.
You can use quantifying words like about or around or approximately to kind of help you with some of that. And percentages are a nice way, especially if you've got some confidentiality issues or you can't talk about dollars, you can use percentages. Did you increase by X percent?
Right. Now, and I can't believe we are coming up to the end of this half hour. I know time goes fast on these calls. Right now, because it's such an unusual time, are there any common threads that you're seeing in people either applying for jobs or working on their resumes that they should be paying attention to, given that we are still, in a pandemic, and, while there's tremendous hope as the vaccines roll out, people are still going to be working in a remote environment for the most part for a while. Is there anything that you're seeing that's coming up that people should be aware of?
So some of the things that I'm seeing are really actually more beneficial for job seekers. And more companies are going to stay remote for a long time. And so that really opens up the market. Like, you may be in Seattle, but there could be a job in Texas or New York that is hiring for remote people. And so really, as a job seeker, you want to take advantage of that. You want to kind of expand your search parameters and potentially even include the word remote as you're searching for these jobs, and maybe remove some of those geographic tags to find alternatives. There's also a lot of confusion potentially with time zones and working in time zones and interviewing in time zones. So I would say really paying attention to that.
Yep.
You don't want to apply for a job that is on the East Coast if you don't like to wake up and start work at 5 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
That's, I think, I have a colleague who works in the Bay Area, and their headquarters are in DC. And what they ended up doing is they bought a super cheap wall clock. And so they have their local time on their wristwatch, but the wall clock is East Coast time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hacks.
Right.
Right. Sarah, do you have any final questions?
No, I think if there's anything, and maybe resumes haven't been evolving during this time, but are there anything that people should be showcasing maybe more of, like soft skills or past remote work or anything like that on resumes that you think could help them during this time?
So definitely, if you've worked as what I'm seeing a lot more of is like people talking about how they're working across teams that are virtual or multiple locations, right? That's definitely, if you have that experience, something you want to call attention to. I've seen people put that they have an office in their house that they can work from too. And that's probably something more for like a cover letter to say, hey, I know that this job is remote. Here's what I have a setup. I have, everything set aside for that. But, being able to work across, and build those relationships with people who are not physically in the office with you is a good skill that recruiters will be looking for.
Right. One thing that we've heard is that people are they're defaulting to people with better communication skills because they feel that they can support them from a technical perspective. So we had a hiring manager recently say, I'll take a communicator with a weaker technical skill set over a great technologist with terrible communication skills.
Always, because you can always teach the technical skills. The interpersonal skills are so much harder to develop and to like hone in on. And it's something that's really hard to communicate on a resume too, in a lot of cases.
It is. That only comes through, I think, in an interview. All right.
Hey, Nancy.
Yeah.
I just have one more real quick. This is kind of having to do with the resumes, but the cover letter, you briefly mentioned, Amy, a couple times, and that's always like the age-old question we ask everyone, and the question we get asked a lot is, do I need to have a cover letter? If those jobs, if it says optional cover letter, should people still put a cover letter in? What should go on that cover letter as well?
Yes. So, a year ago, if you asked me this question, I would say, cover letters, they're kind of optional. Like if it says it's optional, don't worry about it. But we were in a much different job market then. Right now, unemployment's higher. It's definitely an employer's kind of job market. And having a cover letter could potentially set you apart. So if the cover letter is optional, I would do it. Um, my advice to clients is always to spend more time on your resume, customize your resume, focus the most of your energy on that space, because most employers are not going to read your cover letter first. They're going to look at your resume, and if they're interested in interviewing you, then they'll go through the cover letter. Cover letters take more time to read, and it's not the same format. I can't tell that you're qualified from a cover letter, but I can from your resume. So generally, I'll tell people to spend, most of the time on their resume, but to write a well thought out cover letter that they can tweak for the various jobs that they're applying to.
Okay.
I love that.
So what's your final word of advice or guidance to people who are working on these things right now?
It's a numbers game. Just it's really hard, and it can be really disheartening, especially right now when you're looking for a job and everything is virtual. But the more positions you apply to, the more return you're going to get, and it gets quicker, it gets easier as you do it. I've seen in the past people say 100 resumes to get 10 interviews to get one job. So you're only looking at like a 10% rate of return. So it's okay. You're not, you're not struggling worse than most other people out there. We're all in it together. You just kind of have to keep at it.
God, yeah, I think that persistence and diligence is really important as you play the job search game. Okay, Amy Thompson from Sound Interview Professionals. We're going to put your contact information on the slide deck at the end. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I hope you have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, don't go anywhere.